Hello and welcome to Young Money. I'm Nozi Pombandwa. We're coming to you from Town in Johannesburg, and we're catching up with the co-directors of Umuzi. I think it was Bill Gates who said that as we look to the next century, the real leaders will be those who empower others. Let's find out what Andrew Levy and Gilbert Pooley are doing with Umuzi and whether they are the next leaders of tomorrow. So Andrew, just help us understand, how does the Umuzi business model work?
So Umuzi is a non-for-profit organization, and effectively what we do here is we develop the next generation of creative professionals from Kukasi. A lot of young people who are from Kukasi, who are creative, can't get into the creative industry because they can't afford the fees that they have to pay in the tertiary space. We all saw Fees Must Fall last year. It is a huge issue in the creative industry as well. So we've created a platform, an academy for 1 year where young people ages 19 to 25 can come in, and if they're creative, they work with us for a year on the job, and we help them and support them get into the creative industry.
So where did the idea actually come from? Because I know, Fees Must Fall is fairly fresh, but you've had this idea for some time, and maybe also just give us a sense of where to from here. Where is Umuzi going?
That's a good question. So it's been a long time coming. A lot of iterations of the business. We started just as a photography club in Diepsloot, and that was in 2009. And 7 years later, we've been doing a lot of listening to what young people in Kasi communities are telling us. And their two big issues are education at the high level and also access to jobs. And this is nothing new in any industry, but in the creative industry, it seems to be amplified. And so we were like, well, what can we do about it?
Yeah.
And so this is where the idea formed. And it's been a lot of minds involved getting this right. And we've been doing a lot of listening from people who are actually living this problem.
And how do you keep the revenues going? Because I would assume that these young people have to get paid, as you've indicated. Are you actively out pitching for clients?
So we do a little bit of pitching work, but our biggest source of income actually comes from our funder, Investec Bank, who's been a proud supporter of Umuzi for over 5 years now. And we're very excited to partner with them. They really believe in our mission because we're making and creating economic participants, which is going to grow the economy. And that's a huge thing for them as well.
Andrew, I'm going to catch up with some of the young people in
Do
the
it, man.
Umuzi
They're more interesting than I am, for sure.
So we'll see you later, but let's talk to some of these really budding creators and see what they've got to say. We're sitting down with Janet Mazibuko. She's just released a book on Kindle, and she's one of the creatives here at Umuzi. Janet, thank you for talking to us. Crimson Muse, this is the title of the book.
That's the name of the book.
What's this all about?
It's basically an African version of, African romance. It's an African novel that tells a love story between two creatives, a painter and a photographer, and it's just to bring a commercial spin into the African insights and African literature, focusing on themes of mental illness, black love, depression, and the creative struggle in general.
And why the Kindle route? I know it's the way to go in the modern day, but why that decision for you?
I think Kindle is very user-friendly, and everything these days is DIY, so it's basically about having the power and the control of what you want to put out there. So it's available on Smashwords and Kindle. On Smashwords it's free, and on Kindle it's just $1, which translates to about 17 Rand for South Africans.
Yeah, which is fantastic, but give me a sense, is this your first novel that is out?
Yes.
And so where to from here? Are you looking to position yourself as one of the leading writers on the continent and so on?
Yes, well, this is the first book of a 4-part series.
Oh, wow.
So the first book is obviously free to gain readership, and then the second book's going to come out on Valentine's Day, and it's called Crimson Death, and it's not free. So yeah, it is a business. I think as young creators, we need to learn how to teach ourselves to take our art as a business. Yeah.
What are your senses around the appetite for reading amongst young people in South Africa? Do you see them clamoring up, demanding books of this nature?
I think yes, because it's a commercial spin on African literature. I think African literature focuses on dystopian and political. It's always very serious. So why not tackle real issues that are going through in the urban lifestyles of people around us? I mean, I'm an insight. I worked on myself when I was writing this book to gain the true perspective of what Black love really means for young Black people.
What kind of photography do you do?
I like portraiture, right? Photos, so a lot of tight shots, you know.
I noticed that you do everything in black and white. That was quite interesting. What's the reasoning behind that?
Oh, I don't want to sound a bit like emotional and stuff, but I read a quote once, which was done by a Canadian photographer during World War II. I forgot his name. I think his surname was Grant. But what he says is that, like, if you take a photo of a person in color, then you're just taking a photo of their clothes. But if you take a photo of them in black and white, you're taking a photo of their souls.
Oh, fantastic.
So hence the whole portraiture thing. It's like trying to get to know the person, like beyond just seeing who they are.
And so you do a lot of portrait work. Is this a way of commercializing your art? Have you found people who've begun to buy some of your portraits?
Yeah, a couple of people, not the portraits, more people that have bought my work buy the music stuff.
Talk to me a little bit about the work that you're doing around music festivals and why this is also part of what you call your passion project.
Yeah, passion. Like, why I call it a passion project is because it's stuff I do not to make money, but to satisfy a little piece of me somehow and to make a statement, really. Like, I've been going to festivals for a while, right? And I've noticed that, like, what you'd call a white festival is documented so well. Like, there's so much thought into how it's going to be marketed after and all that stuff. But when you come to the black side of life, it's not really, like, they don't care about it, you know? It's like black weddings and white weddings, you know? But, like, my work in the space of the festivals, the stadium and all that, is like trying to make it seem as if, like, it's this epic thing, like make a production out of it, you know what I mean? So it's really more of a statement and to show that, like, yo, man, if you really want to make something epic, you need to put some effort into
And so
it.
if we're catching up with you 3, 4, 5 years from now, where are we finding you? What are you doing? You know, is your name on big billboards? What's happening?
I'm really not interested in names being in billboards or whatever. I'm just really interested in like messing, like just taking the game and putting it upside down, you know? Like, so right now I'm like super obsessed with making content that's less than a minute. You know what I mean? Like trying to put across a message in less than a minute because I feel the attention span of the nowadays or youth consumer is small, you know? So what I want to do in the next 5 years is actually I want to open a space like this, but for established artists. Like artists like fail to like do business stuff, you know, like admin and all that stuff. So I want to open a space where you have a boardroom if you're having a meeting, you have a space and you have storage, you know, like, so that's what I want to do. I don't really want to be on billboard. I don't care about that really.
So Okumoto, describe the kind of photography that you do.
Okay, I'm a photojournalist, documentary photographer, portrait photographer, events photographer, so yeah.
It sounds quite broad across the board. So which of these is perhaps the one that speaks most to your heart and resonates with your passion?
I think for me it's documentary because I was introduced into street photography initially, but then that led into me doing documentary.
And what kind of stories are you telling through your art?
I tell stories of people who you won't usually hear their stories on mainstream media, like people who recycle, who do recycling in town, taxi drivers. I tell those kind of stories, and the main aim for me for doing this is that I want to change the stereotypes that have been going around like among communities about these people.
Yes.
So I'm telling their stories in a more positive light. Basically, I'm just showing their importance within society.
Yeah. How do they usually react when you approach them to take their photos? Do they feel that they could really be part of telling that story?
A lot of them, what happens is they will tell you, no, I don't want to be on camera.
Yeah.
But the moment you tell them that I'm telling your story from your side, that's when they become receptive, and
Yes.
they will actually just chill with you for some time. So you can actually just get the real story as to why do they do what they do, where do they come from.
Yes.
So everyone wants to be heard. So
Yeah.
the moment you tell them that, no, I'm going to be telling your story, they are willing to sit down with you and tell you about them.
And of course, a lot of you guys here at Umuzi, although you are doing work that is creative, you also want to commercialize your work and make money from it. How's that journey been for you?
I think for me, since I've been doing this for about 2 to 3 years now,
Yeah.
how I've been making a living, it's been through events and stuff. But I want to get to a point where I'm able to make a living out of my own personal work. I want to get to a point where I'm able to publish a book out of my own work, and even sell some of those works.
Yes.
I'm working towards that now, yeah.
So it certainly sounds fantastic. And perhaps just as a final reflection, do you get a sense that South Africa is ready for the kind of imaging that you're putting out?
I think now, especially in the continent, we're at a point where a lot of Africans are telling their own stories. We are telling them how we know them. So a lot of people can relate to the stories that we tell, because now we come from the same space. So if I'm telling this story from my own experience, someone out there might also relate because they understand how these stories came about. So definitely people are ready, and we are at a point where a lot of African people are telling their own stories from how they know them. So yeah.
And that brings us to the end of the show for this episode of Young Money. Guys, thank you so much for making the time to join us. And as you can see, I'm also trying to get that creative swag going. And don't forget that if you do want the Young Money crew to come to you, all you need to do is just drop me a tweet. It's at The Real Nosy. Of course, you can also follow me at CNBC Africa. And don't forget our hashtag, it's Young Money 410. Until next time, it's goodbye.